Taiwan expanded its economy by nearly 13% in the second quarter. Taiwan expanded its economy by nearly 13% in the second quarter. Taiwan expanded its economy by nearly 13% in the second quarter. That surprise growth makes the island one of the top economic performers in the world. That surprise growth makes the island one of the top economic performers in the world. That surprise growth makes the island one of the top economic performers in the world. The main engine driving this surge is the global rush for artificial intelligence. The main engine driving this surge is the global rush for artificial intelligence. The main engine driving this surge is the global rush for artificial intelligence. Technology companies around the globe need powerful microchips, and Taiwan manufactures the vast majority. Technology companies around the globe need powerful microchips, and Taiwan manufactures the vast majority. Technology companies around the globe need powerful microchips, and Taiwan manufactures the vast majority. Orders for these high-tech components pushed total export sales up by 40% in June. Orders for these high-tech components pushed total export sales up by 40% in June. Orders for these high-tech components pushed total export sales up by 40% in June. Real exports of goods and services rose by more than 21% overall. Real exports of goods and services rose by more than 21% overall. Real exports of goods and services rose by more than 21% overall. At the same time, Taiwan has transformed its international trading relationships. At the same time, Taiwan has transformed its international trading relationships. At the same time, Taiwan has transformed its international trading relationships. For the first time in 25 years, the United States imports more from Taiwan than China. For the first time in 25 years, the United States imports more from Taiwan than China. For the first time in 25 years, the United States imports more from Taiwan than China. Taiwanese businesses have redirected almost all their overseas investments toward American markets. Taiwanese businesses have redirected almost all their overseas investments toward American markets. Taiwanese businesses have redirected almost all their overseas investments toward American markets. In fact, less than 1% of their outbound capital went to China earlier this year. In fact, less than 1% of their outbound capital went to China earlier this year. In fact, less than 1% of their outbound capital went to China earlier this year. This shift has strengthened ties with Washington while insulating Taiwan from pressure from Beijing. This shift has strengthened ties with Washington while insulating Taiwan from pressure from Beijing. This shift has strengthened ties with Washington while insulating Taiwan from pressure from Beijing. The local stock market has also surged to become one of the largest financial markets anywhere. The local stock market has also surged to become one of the largest financial markets anywhere. The local stock market has also surged to become one of the largest financial markets anywhere. Household purchasing power across the island now ranks among the highest in Asia. Household purchasing power across the island now ranks among the highest in Asia. Household purchasing power across the island now ranks among the highest in Asia. Yet this flood of tech money is creating a serious imbalance at home. Yet this flood of tech money is creating a serious imbalance at home. Yet this flood of tech money is creating a serious imbalance at home. The economic boom is concentrated almost entirely in semiconductors and advanced hardware. The economic boom is concentrated almost entirely in semiconductors and advanced hardware. The economic boom is concentrated almost entirely in semiconductors and advanced hardware. Workers in traditional factories, retail stores, and restaurants are feeling left behind. Workers in traditional factories, retail stores, and restaurants are feeling left behind. Workers in traditional factories, retail stores, and restaurants are feeling left behind. Wages in those service sectors remain flat, while local prices for food and housing increase. Wages in those service sectors remain flat, while local prices for food and housing increase. Wages in those service sectors remain flat, while local prices for food and housing increase. Government officials describe this growing divide as an M-shaped economy. Government officials describe this growing divide as an M-shaped economy. Government officials describe this growing divide as an M-shaped economy. They worry that society is splitting into a wealthy tech class and a struggling majority. They worry that society is splitting into a wealthy tech class and a struggling majority. They worry that society is splitting into a wealthy tech class and a struggling majority. Labour shortages are also hurting small firms because young professionals prefer high-paying tech jobs. Labour shortages are also hurting small firms because young professionals prefer high-paying tech jobs. Labour shortages are also hurting small firms because young professionals prefer high-paying tech jobs. Local elections are scheduled for November, and voters are focused on these everyday living costs. Local elections are scheduled for November, and voters are focused on these everyday living costs. Local elections are scheduled for November, and voters are focused on these everyday living costs. Government ministers are now trying to address the gap before public discontent grows. Government ministers are now trying to address the gap before public discontent grows. Government ministers are now trying to address the gap before public discontent grows. They plan to funnel resources into energy security, transport infrastructure, and vocational training. They plan to funnel resources into energy security, transport infrastructure, and vocational training. They plan to funnel resources into energy security, transport infrastructure, and vocational training. They also hope to help smaller service businesses modernize and raise employee pay. They also hope to help smaller service businesses modernize and raise employee pay. They also hope to help smaller service businesses modernize and raise employee pay. Taiwan has demonstrated that its microchips can secure its economy and attract powerful allies. Taiwan has demonstrated that its microchips can secure its economy and attract powerful allies. Taiwan has demonstrated that its microchips can secure its economy and attract powerful allies. Its next hurdle is ensuring that artificial intelligence enriches the whole country, not just chip makers. Its next hurdle is ensuring that artificial intelligence enriches the whole country, not just chip makers. Its next hurdle is ensuring that artificial intelligence enriches the whole country, not just chip makers. Moving on from Taiwan's booming technology economy, we head to the desert of Nevada. Moving on from Taiwan's booming technology economy, we head to the desert of Nevada. Moving on from Taiwan's booming technology economy, we head to the desert of Nevada. A mining company called 3 Proton Lithium recently made a big discovery there. A mining company called 3 Proton Lithium recently made a big discovery there. A mining company called 3 Proton Lithium recently made a big discovery there. Deep under the desert floor, they found what could be America's largest deposit of tungsten. Deep under the desert floor, they found what could be America's largest deposit of tungsten. Deep under the desert floor, they found what could be America's largest deposit of tungsten. Tungsten is a dense and very tough metal. Tungsten is a dense and very tough metal. Tungsten is a dense and very tough metal. It is essential for making cutting tools, aircraft parts, and military weapons. It is essential for making cutting tools, aircraft parts, and military weapons. It is essential for making cutting tools, aircraft parts, and military weapons. Yet the United States stopped mining tungsten a decade ago. Yet the United States stopped mining tungsten a decade ago. Yet the United States stopped mining tungsten a decade ago. Today, the country relies almost entirely on imports from overseas. Today, the country relies almost entirely on imports from overseas. Today, the country relies almost entirely on imports from overseas. That reliance has created a serious problem. That reliance has created a serious problem. That reliance has created a serious problem. Global prices for tungsten have jumped nearly 600% over the past 18 months. Global prices for tungsten have jumped nearly 600% over the past 18 months. Global prices for tungsten have jumped nearly 600% over the past 18 months. China controls roughly 80% of the global market. China controls roughly 80% of the global market. China controls roughly 80% of the global market. It has recently restricted exports to protect its own supplies. It has recently restricted exports to protect its own supplies. It has recently restricted exports to protect its own supplies. Meanwhile, recent conflicts have drained military metal reserves worldwide. Meanwhile, recent conflicts have drained military metal reserves worldwide. Meanwhile, recent conflicts have drained military metal reserves worldwide. Under these conditions, finding a huge domestic deposit sounds like a massive victory. Under these conditions, finding a huge domestic deposit sounds like a massive victory. Under these conditions, finding a huge domestic deposit sounds like a massive victory. The company assessed the find at nearly 1.8 million tons. The company assessed the find at nearly 1.8 million tons. The company assessed the find at nearly 1.8 million tons. That is more than 5 times larger than any other known deposit in the country. That is more than 5 times larger than any other known deposit in the country. That is more than 5 times larger than any other known deposit in the country. The minerals could be worth about $150 billion. The minerals could be worth about $150 billion. The minerals could be worth about $150 billion. However, there is an extraordinary obstacle in the desert. However, there is an extraordinary obstacle in the desert. However, there is an extraordinary obstacle in the desert. NASA is blocking development on a third of the site. NASA is blocking development on a third of the site. NASA is blocking development on a third of the site. The space agency relies on 17 square miles of this barren salt desert. The space agency relies on 17 square miles of this barren salt desert. The space agency relies on 17 square miles of this barren salt desert. The land is uniquely flat and desolate. The land is uniquely flat and desolate. The land is uniquely flat and desolate. For years, NASA has used it to calibrate delicate satellite instruments. For years, NASA has used it to calibrate delicate satellite instruments. For years, NASA has used it to calibrate delicate satellite instruments. Scientists use the flat desert surface to check sensors on passing satellites. Scientists use the flat desert surface to check sensors on passing satellites. Scientists use the flat desert surface to check sensors on passing satellites. That calibration ensures satellites collect accurate data about our planet. That calibration ensures satellites collect accurate data about our planet. That calibration ensures satellites collect accurate data about our planet. NASA says heavy mining would ruin the site. NASA says heavy mining would ruin the site. NASA says heavy mining would ruin the site. Heavy trucks and drilling equipment would kick up thick dust clouds and disturb the flat ground. Heavy trucks and drilling equipment would kick up thick dust clouds and disturb the flat ground. Heavy trucks and drilling equipment would kick up thick dust clouds and disturb the flat ground. That would make precise satellite testing impossible. That would make precise satellite testing impossible. That would make precise satellite testing impossible. The mining company is now lobbying top government officials to lift the ban. The mining company is now lobbying top government officials to lift the ban. The mining company is now lobbying top government officials to lift the ban. They argue that local tungsten production is vital for national security. They argue that local tungsten production is vital for national security. They argue that local tungsten production is vital for national security. But NASA says its stance remains unchanged. but NASA says its stance remains unchanged. But NASA says its stance remains unchanged. America now faces a difficult balance. America now faces a difficult balance. America now faces a difficult balance. It can safeguard the quiet desert needed for space science. It can safeguard the quiet desert needed for space science. It can safeguard the quiet desert needed for space science. Or it can dig up the metal required for defense. Or it can dig up the metal required for defense. Or it can dig up the metal required for defense. For now, those two national priorities remain locked in a standoff. For now, those two national priorities remain locked in a standoff. For now, those two national priorities remain locked in a standoff. Moving on to our third story today, we turn from space-age metals to cash. Moving on to our third story today, we turn from space-age metals to cash. Moving on to our third story today, we turn from space-age metals to cash. President Javier Milei of Argentina is attempting a very unusual economic move. President Javier Milei of Argentina is attempting a very unusual economic move. President Javier Milei of Argentina is attempting a very unusual economic move. He wants to ban his country's central bank from ever printing money again. He wants to ban his country's central bank from ever printing money again. He wants to ban his country's central bank from ever printing money again. In a speech this week, Milei accused past leaders of looting national reserves. In a speech this week, Milei accused past leaders of looting national reserves. In a speech this week, Milei accused past leaders of looting national reserves. For nearly a century, Argentine politicians routinely printed cash to pay their debts. For nearly a century, Argentine politicians routinely printed cash to pay their debts. For nearly a century, Argentine politicians routinely printed cash to pay their debts. That bad habit destroyed confidence in the currency and created painful price rises. That bad habit destroyed confidence in the currency and created painful price rises. That bad habit destroyed confidence in the currency and created painful price rises. When Milei took office in December 2023, monthly inflation was 13%. When Milei took office in December 2023, monthly inflation was 13%. When Milei took office in December 2023, monthly inflation was 13%. He took a metaphorical chainsaw to state budgets and stopped bank funding. He took a metaphorical chainsaw to state budgets and stopped bank funding. He took a metaphorical chainsaw to state budgets and stopped bank funding. Those aggressive budget cuts helped push monthly inflation down to under 2%. Those aggressive budget cuts helped push monthly inflation down to under 2%. Those aggressive budget cuts helped push monthly inflation down to under 2%. Now, Milei wants to lock those victories into permanent national law. Now, Millet wants to lock those victories into permanent national law. Now, Millet wants to lock those victories into permanent national law. He describes his proposal as the biggest bank reform in 91 years. He describes his proposal as the biggest bank reform in 91 years. He describes his proposal as the biggest bank reform in 91 years. Under his proposed rules, the central bank receives one single primary goal. Under his proposed rules, the central bank receives one single primary goal. Under his proposed rules, the central bank receives one single primary goal. It must protect the purchasing power of the national currency above all else. It must protect the purchasing power of the national currency above all else. It must protect the purchasing power of the national currency above all else. Politicians would no longer be allowed to demand free money from the bank. Politicians would no longer be allowed to demand free money from the bank. Politicians would no longer be allowed to demand free money from the bank. To protect bank leaders from political pressure, Millet wants a new shield. To protect bank leaders from political pressure, Millet wants a new shield. To protect bank leaders from political pressure, Millet wants a new shield. Removing the bank governor would require a two-thirds vote in Parliament. Removing the bank governor would require a two-thirds vote in Parliament. Removing the bank governor would require a two-thirds vote in Parliament. He has even suggested criminal penalties for officials who facilitate money printing. He has even suggested criminal penalties for officials who facilitate money printing. He has even suggested criminal penalties for officials who facilitate money printing. Another US-style measure would shut down state spending if budgets run deficits. Another US-style measure would shut down state spending if budgets run deficits. Another US-style measure would shut down state spending if budgets run deficits. So can a president really bind the hands of future governments forever? So can a president really bind the hands of future governments forever? So can a president really bind the hands of future governments forever? The main weakness of this plan comes down to simple constitutional math. The main weakness of this plan comes down to simple constitutional math. The main weakness of this plan comes down to simple constitutional math. Any future parliament could undo these strict rules with a simple majority vote. Any future parliament could undo these strict rules with a simple majority vote. Any future parliament could undo these strict rules with a simple majority vote. Raising the political cost of printing money helps, but cannot guarantee permanent restraint. Raising the political cost of printing money helps, but cannot guarantee permanent restraint. Raising the political cost of printing money helps, but cannot guarantee permanent restraint. There is also a surprising contradiction in Millet's libertarian approach. There is also a surprising contradiction in Millet's libertarian approach. There is also a surprising contradiction in Millet's libertarian approach. He continues to enforce strict controls on buying US dollars. He continues to enforce strict controls on buying US dollars. He continues to enforce strict controls on buying US dollars. While he hates government intervention, he fears a completely free exchange rate right now. While he hates government intervention, he fears a completely free exchange rate right now. While he hates government intervention, he fears a completely free exchange rate right now. He worries that sudden market movements could spark another round of rapid inflation. He worries that sudden market movements could spark another round of rapid inflation. He worries that sudden market movements could spark another round of rapid inflation. That means the state still sets Argentina's most critical financial price. That means the state still sets Argentina's most critical financial price. That means the state still sets Argentina's most critical financial price. Furthermore, keeping interest rates high to protect the peso has slowed down business growth. Furthermore, keeping interest rates high to protect the peso has slowed down business growth. Furthermore, keeping interest rates high to protect the peso has slowed down business growth. Local firms are finding it harder to pay back existing loans. Local firms are finding it harder to pay back existing loans. Local firms are finding it harder to pay back existing loans. For ordinary people in Buenos Aires, life feels somewhat calmer today. For ordinary people in Buenos Aires, life feels somewhat calmer today. For ordinary people in Buenos Aires, life feels somewhat calmer today. Supermarket prices are no longer jumping up every single week. Supermarket prices are no longer jumping up every single week. Supermarket prices are no longer jumping up every single week. Yet the ultimate test rests on political culture rather than written statutes. Yet the ultimate test rests on political culture rather than written statutes. Yet the ultimate test rests on political culture rather than written statutes. If voters select a big spender next time, these legal shields may quickly fall apart. If voters select a big spender next time, these legal shields may quickly fall apart. If voters select a big spender next time, these legal shields may quickly fall apart. For our fourth topic, we turn from banking policy in Argentina to a very expensive warship. For our fourth topic, we turn from banking policy in Argentina to a very expensive warship. For our fourth topic, we turn from banking policy in Argentina to a very expensive warship. The United States Navy retired its first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier 14 years ago. The United States Navy retired its first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier 14 years ago. The United States Navy retired its first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier 14 years ago. The famous ship was nicknamed Big E by her crew during decades of service. The famous ship was nicknamed Big E by her crew during decades of service. The famous ship was nicknamed Big E by her crew during decades of service. She entered service in 1961 and remained the longest warship ever constructed. She entered service in 1961 and remained the longest warship ever constructed. She entered service in 1961 and remained the longest warship ever constructed. Yet even after leaving active duty, the vessel continues to cost taxpayers huge sums of money. Yet even after leaving active duty, the vessel continues to cost taxpayers huge sums of money. Yet even after leaving active duty, the vessel continues to cost taxpayers huge sums of money. Scrapping the Enterprise will eventually cost more than $1.3 billion. Scrapping the Enterprise will eventually cost more than $1.3 billion. Scrapping the Enterprise will eventually cost more than $1.3 billion. That total equals roughly a quarter of the ship's original building cost. That total equals roughly a quarter of the ship's original building cost. That total equals roughly a quarter of the ship's original building cost. So why is taking apart an old ship so extraordinarily expensive? So why is taking apart an old ship so extraordinarily expensive? So why is taking apart an old ship so extraordinarily expensive? The main explanation lies deep inside the iron hull of the warship. The main explanation lies deep inside the iron hull of the warship. The main explanation lies deep inside the iron hull of the warship. Unlike conventional ships, this massive vessel relies on 8 separate nuclear reactors for power. Unlike conventional ships, this massive vessel relies on 8 separate nuclear reactors for power. Unlike conventional ships, this massive vessel relies on 8 separate nuclear reactors for power. Navy engineers removed the spent nuclear fuel rods almost 10 years ago. Navy engineers removed the spent nuclear fuel rods almost 10 years ago. Navy engineers removed the spent nuclear fuel rods almost 10 years ago. However, radioactive contamination remains embedded in the steel structure and cooling pipes. However, radioactive contamination remains embedded in the steel structure and cooling pipes. However, radioactive contamination remains embedded in the steel structure and cooling pipes. Workers cannot simply slice the hull into scrap metal with standard equipment. Workers cannot simply slice the hull into scrap metal with standard equipment. Workers cannot simply slice the hull into scrap metal with standard equipment. Instead, every single section must be carefully washed, cut, and sealed into special containers. Instead, every single section must be carefully washed, cut, and sealed into special containers. Instead, every single section must be carefully washed, cut, and sealed into special containers. Hazardous materials will then travel across the country to licensed disposal sites. Hazardous materials will then travel across the country to licensed disposal sites. Hazardous materials will then travel across the country to licensed disposal sites. The Pentagon recently signed a new contract to complete this final dismantling work. The Pentagon recently signed a new contract to complete this final dismantling work. The Pentagon recently signed a new contract to complete this final dismantling work. A commercial shipyard in Alabama won the job for $418.5 million. A commercial shipyard in Alabama won the job for $418.5 million. A commercial shipyard in Alabama won the job for $418.5 million. Interestingly, an earlier attempt to award the contract ran into trouble in court. Interestingly, an earlier attempt to award the contract ran into trouble in court. Interestingly, an earlier attempt to award the contract ran into trouble in court. A competing company complained about a computer system glitch during the first bidding process. A competing company complained about a computer system glitch during the first bidding process. A competing company complained about a computer system glitch during the first bidding process. Judges ordered a fresh competition, which forced the winning bid down significantly. Judges ordered a fresh competition, which forced the winning bid down significantly. Judges ordered a fresh competition, which forced the winning bid down significantly. That price cut saved taxpayers over $100 million compared to the previous agreement. That price cut saved taxpayers over $100 million compared to the previous agreement. That price cut saved taxpayers over $100 million compared to the previous agreement. The contract is also fixed in price, so the company must absorb any unexpected extra expenses. The contract is also fixed in price, so the company must absorb any unexpected extra expenses. The contract is also fixed in price, so the company must absorb any unexpected extra expenses. Work on the carrier in Mobile is scheduled to finish by September 2030. Work on the carrier in Mobile is scheduled to finish by September 2030. Work on the carrier in Mobile is scheduled to finish by September 2030. By that date, dismantling the ship will have taken 18 long years. By that date, dismantling the ship will have taken 18 long years. By that date, dismantling the ship will have taken 18 long years. That disassembly period is 6 times longer than the time it took to build the vessel. That disassembly period is 6 times longer than the time it took to build the vessel. That disassembly period is 6 times longer than the time it took to build the vessel. This delayed cleanup offers a sobering lesson for future naval spending. This delayed cleanup offers a sobering lesson for future naval spending. This delayed cleanup offers a sobering lesson for future naval spending. The Navy will need to dismantle many more nuclear carriers in the coming decades. The Navy will need to dismantle many more nuclear carriers in the coming decades. The Navy will need to dismantle many more nuclear carriers in the coming decades. Governments often celebrate the arrival of spectacular military hardware. Governments often celebrate the arrival of spectacular military hardware. Governments often celebrate the arrival of spectacular military hardware. Yet the quiet cost of cleaning up nuclear legacy equipment can drag on for generations. Yet the quiet cost of cleaning up nuclear legacy equipment can drag on for generations. Yet the quiet cost of cleaning up nuclear legacy equipment can drag on for generations. After looking at costly military hardware, we finish today with a quiet shift in global finance. After looking at costly military hardware, we finish today with a quiet shift in global finance. After looking at costly military hardware, we finish today with a quiet shift in global finance. 25 years ago, European banks dominated the global financial world. 25 years ago, European banks dominated the global financial world. 25 years ago, European banks dominated the global financial world. Each of the top 5 lenders in Europe was worth more than America's biggest bank. Each of the top 5 lenders in Europe was worth more than America's biggest bank. Each of the top 5 lenders in Europe was worth more than America's biggest bank. Today, that balance of financial power has flipped completely. Today, that balance of financial power has flipped completely. Today, that balance of financial power has flipped completely. America's largest bank is now worth more than those top 5 European lenders combined. America's largest bank is now worth more than those top 5 European lenders combined. America's largest bank is now worth more than those top 5 European lenders combined. These include major national institutions in France, Germany, and Spain. These include major national institutions in France, Germany, and Spain. These include major national institutions in France, Germany, and Spain. So why are European banks shrinking on the global stage? So why are European banks shrinking on the global stage? So why are European banks shrinking on the global stage? Part of the answer lies in overall economic growth. Part of the answer lies in overall economic growth. Part of the answer lies in overall economic growth. The American economy grew much faster after the financial crisis of 2008. The American economy grew much faster after the financial crisis of 2008. The American economy grew much faster after the financial crisis of 2008. In fact, the United States outperformed Europe by nearly 20 percentage points over that period. In fact, the United States outperformed Europe by nearly 20 percentage points over that period. In fact, the United States outperformed Europe by nearly 20 percentage points over that period. American markets also give growing companies more choices to raise money. American markets also give growing companies more choices to raise money. American markets also give growing companies more choices to raise money. Firms in America can easily issue shares or sell corporate bonds. Firms in America can easily issue shares or sell corporate bonds. Firms in America can easily issue shares or sell corporate bonds. By contrast, European businesses still rely heavily on traditional loans from local banks. By contrast, European businesses still rely heavily on traditional loans from local banks. By contrast, European businesses still rely heavily on traditional loans from local banks. That heavy reliance brings us to a deep policy disagreement inside Europe. That heavy reliance brings us to a deep policy disagreement inside Europe. That heavy reliance brings us to a deep policy disagreement inside Europe. A recent European Commission report sounded a clear wake-up call about this divide. A recent European Commission report sounded a clear wake-up call about this divide. A recent European Commission report sounded a clear wake-up call about this divide. Merging banks across European borders remains extremely difficult and slow. Merging banks across European borders remains extremely difficult and slow. Merging banks across European borders remains extremely difficult and slow. National regulations often stop lenders from combining into true continental giants. National regulations often stop lenders from combining into true continental giants. National regulations often stop lenders from combining into true continental giants. At the same time, legacy banks point their fingers at strict central bank rules. At the same time, legacy banks point their fingers at strict central bank rules. At the same time, legacy banks point their fingers at strict central bank rules. The European Central Bank forces lenders to hold large cash reserves. The European Central Bank forces lenders to hold large cash reserves. The European Central Bank forces lenders to hold large cash reserves. These reserves are funds kept safe to absorb unexpected financial shocks. These reserves are funds kept safe to absorb unexpected financial shocks. These reserves are funds kept safe to absorb unexpected financial shocks. However, locking away so much cash leaves less money available for fresh loans. However, locking away so much cash leaves less money available for fresh loans. However, locking away so much cash leaves less money available for fresh loans. Politicians in Brussels now argue that these rules limit lending to small businesses. Politicians in Brussels now argue that these rules limit lending to small businesses. Politicians in Brussels now argue that these rules limit lending to small businesses. Some critics even argue the central bank is creating the quiet stability of a graveyard. Some critics even argue the central bank is creating the quiet stability of a graveyard. Some critics even argue the central bank is creating the quiet stability of a graveyard. Meanwhile, regulators across the Atlantic are taking a very different approach. Meanwhile, regulators across the Atlantic are taking a very different approach. Meanwhile, regulators across the Atlantic are taking a very different approach. The United States plans to reduce reserve requirements for big banks by about 5%. The United States plans to reduce reserve requirements for big banks by about 5%. The United States plans to reduce reserve requirements for big banks by about 5%. British regulators are also making modest cuts to their own capital standards. British regulators are also making modest cuts to their own capital standards. British regulators are also making modest cuts to their own capital standards. Lower reserves allow banks to lend more freely, though they also increase risk. Lower reserves allow banks to lend more freely, though they also increase risk. Lower reserves allow banks to lend more freely, though they also increase risk. European central bankers still prefer maximum safety, even if it limits economic expansion. European central bankers still prefer maximum safety, even if it limits economic expansion. European central bankers still prefer maximum safety, even if it limits economic expansion. This clash leaves Europe facing a tough choice for its economic future. This clash leaves Europe facing a tough choice for its economic future. This clash leaves Europe facing a tough choice for its economic future. Very safe banks protect against panics, but they might not fund future innovation. Very safe banks protect against panics, but they might not fund future innovation. Very safe banks protect against panics, but they might not fund future innovation. If European banks remain small, local companies may soon look across the ocean for investment. If European banks remain small, local companies may soon look across the ocean for investment. If European banks remain small, local companies may soon look across the ocean for investment. That brings us to the end of our episode for this morning. That brings us to the end of our episode for this morning. That brings us to the end of our episode for this morning. Thank you for listening, and I wish you a pleasant day ahead. Thank you for listening, and I wish you a pleasant day ahead. Thank you for listening, and I wish you a pleasant day ahead.